Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Transcending Together with Julianne and Lee. Good afternoon, beautiful and amazing human beings. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour of music that I've just played. So, as it happens, Lee and I are pre-recording this because we both got quite a lot of work to do, so we've decided to put this one in the can before the week. So I apologize for the pre-record. Today is Sunday, and yesterday the Springboks beat England at rugby. What do you think about that? Before we start anything else, because that's really
Yeah.
important.
Well, I've got no nails at the moment because I bit them off. It was a heart-stopping game. My blood pressure went through the roof, I reckon. But I just want to also come in here and say, not only did the Springboks beat England in rugby World Cup semi-final, but they
Oh,
also
you're not going to say it. You're not
in
going
the
to say
cricket at
it.
the Cricket World Cup. So for me, because I've lived in England for the last 20 years, I will support England against any opponent in the world except the Springboks. um,
Yeah, it's one of those things, national pride, right? Well, I'm Zimbabwean, so we don't have any skin in the game anymore, which
yeah.
is sad because most of our players at youth level end up in South Africa anyway. So, but I don't think there's actually any Zimbabweans in the Springboks right now. So there was
Not
Beeston
currently, no.
Tawarira, Bobby
Yeah.
Skinstat. There were a few that were Zimbabwean born. From an Australian perspective, George Gregan was from Zambia. So
Close enough.
yeah, and I still think a big part of it is if the first ball you pick up is a football, that's that's what you know. But for young people, if the first ball you ever pick up is a rugby ball, you just know stuff about the game that no one else knows. And there is what's the right word? It's almost like a genetic consciousness, I guess, in a way, about how the ball bounces and what to do with it and all of those things. So, yeah, I don't want to be too spiritual about it, but it is quite spiritual. I will admit I am a dyed in the wool rugby fanatic. And because we're pre-recording this on Sunday, so tomorrow evening we there is a mediation session with the RFU between trans people and the RFU, trans women specifically, because I think, as I've always said, trans men have got a free pass. It's going to be interesting, I think, and we'll let you know next week how the meeting goes. But part of the reason for letting you know this is a pre-record is it is a Sunday. The meeting is tomorrow, which is Monday. This show is going to go out on Wednesday, so I have no idea how that meeting's going to go. So I've just got to kind of see where we get to with that. But yeah, so I think that promises to be a very interesting meeting. I hope it's interesting. I hope we can find a common ground with the RFU to create a pathway for trans women to play this. I know they like to say that that football is the beautiful game, but I just think back to that old adage that rugby is football is a game played by gentlemen but supported by barbarians, and rugby is a game played by barbarians but supported by gentlemen.
Gentlemen.
And it's kind of true because I just love looking at those scenes from the the footage yesterday of English and South African supporters sitting next to each other.
Next to each other in the stadium, I know.
I mean, isn't that incredible? It just, yeah, I think it just says so much about the sport. You know, people think that it's all about brute force and aggression, and it is for 80 minutes, but I can guarantee you every single one of those players went and had a beer or a non-alcoholic beer or whatever it is that they choose with their opposition after the game, and the respect that they show for the opposition, I think, is something that you don't get in football. I don't think you get, well, you don't. You definitely don't get that. So I thought that was interesting. Um, so you got no fingernails? I've got no. I think I bit all my nail polish off yesterday.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like everyone around me that I was watching with were going, well, I suppose we're supporting England against the All Blacks next Saturday. And it was like right up until the last, what, there was 2.5 minutes
Two and
left
a
in the
half
game
minutes. Yeah.
when South Africa went in the lead for the first time. And it was just that kick, that guy,
Andre Pollard.
Andre Pollard did. I mean, as cool as a cucumber. I mean, this kick puts you into the
Yeah.
Rugby World Cup or not. And he was just as cool as a cucumber, kicked it over, job done. Um, Amazing. That big match
Yeah.
temperament.
It's interesting, you know, because I've always had a soft spot for Joe Marler. So back in the day when I used to play for Haywards Heath, Joe Marler was one of our greatest sons, and he went on to play for Harlequins. And I met him with my son at the Twickenham Stoop, and I've always been a Harlequin at my heart. I'm not wearing my Harlequins strip today because I want to look pretty. But the thing is, like, so from a Harlequins, so I've never understood the English fascination. You know, both, you know, all the selectors always seem to love Sinclair. And when I saw that England was starting with Cole and Marler, I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. And true as nuts, when Sinclair came on, that's exactly when the Springboks started beating the hell out of the out of the English. And I'm like, yeah, you see, what can I say?
Yeah. and, and at the same time, Ox came on, and
Oh
his his
yeah,
his motto is "Salads don't win scrums."
I
There was
love
a
that.
lovely
Yeah,
meme going around with him.
I'm gonna put some
He
memes up.
loves,
Don't worry, there's gonna
yeah,
be lots of memes coming in. Yeah.
he loves chocolate cake apparently, and his motto is "Salads don't win scrums."
Oh, it's so true, man. And I think that was one of the things that when I was living in South Africa that I was just like, there are so many people. I mean, Wales historically was always, their thing was because all the coal mines were in Wales, Welsh rugby, their scrums were always at the foremost of everything that they did. And obviously, since Maggie Thatcher destroyed the coal mining industry to destroy the unions, to create an ascendancy of capitalism, whole other story. Did you believe I was going to be able to link sport with politics? But there we go. So they so Welsh rugby was always, it was always these big guys that were like in the mines, fit, strong, and I never understood why South Africa didn't capitalize on that. You know, take these big, strong guys out of the mines and put them on the rugby field. Um, So I'm glad they've done that. And I think I think, and it's controversial, but I do think that one of the reasons South African rugby has remained institutionally racist is I do think that at a certain level, I think white South Africans understand that when they really let loose and let black South Africans play the sport, we will have a genuine all black team, not all blacks, but an all black team. And I think there's so many players that have just absolutely brought their people, brought black South Africans to the forefront. And I think Sia Kolisi is a big part of that. I think Beeston Tawarira, even though he was Zimbabwean, gave young black kids an opportunity to aspire to something. And Sia Kolisi as the captain. And I love the fact that when Sia goes off, who's the front row guy that takes charge?
Yeah, it's the hooker, Pimpy.
Mpimpy. That's it. Yeah. And I think that's so important. It's so important to give young black South Africans people they can identify with. And I think that's really incredible. But the show is not about rugby, believe it or not. We're not actually talking rugby today. But for Lee and I, it's kind of like, yeah, it was just awesome. We did enjoy that. So, because it's Sunday and we're pre recording on a Sunday, we thought it would be a really good idea to have a Bible study. We're going to Bible study today, people.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I think last week we kind of skirted with danger, I think, to a certain extent, because I don't think we necessarily came down one side or the other. I think we threaded the needle quite well in terms of making sure we were balanced, and I like to believe we're balanced. This week's not going to be so balanced, though, if I do say so. Because as an LGBT person, I'll be honest with you, the one thing that I've never completely understood is why it is. How can somebody be simultaneously LGBT and Christian? I don't get it. Because if you join a club, the club has rules, and from what I understand, the Christian club is I don't see that there's space for LGBT people in there. And I understand why LGBT people might be theist. I understand that they have a God, and they need to believe that there is a higher power. And I would never take that away from them. I just don't think that the biblical one is the one for you. And that's the thing that I struggle with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I grew up in the Methodist Christian faith. I went to Sunday school and youth church, teen church, and eventually I was like in my 20s and I was still going to church and still involved with youth groups and things like that. And it got to the point where, as I was coming to terms with my own sexuality, I was going, these people are so against gays and lesbians. Trans wasn't so famous back in the 1990s, that I don't feel comfortable being in this club, as you say. because my whole existence is wrong in their eyes. And that's kind of like when I broke away and started looking for my own, sort of interpretation of God and, the higher power and things like that. So, although nothing actually happened to me, I just felt this uncomfortableness being in
Yeah.
this, religion that basically says that my whole existence is wrong, that I'm going to go to hell. So that was a turning point for me. Um, and that was like in the mid 1990s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get that. I was fortunate in that I was raised. It's interesting because I tend to be quite, if you get me drawn on me and my dad, we have a lot to talk about. Yet, I tend to be quoting him a lot. As I was editing last week's show, and I was sort of going back through, I do tend to reference him a lot. And I do think he had a significant impact on my life, both positively and negatively. There's a lot of things that I cannot reconcile that he did. However, he was wise and he taught me a lot of things. And I think one of the greatest gifts he gave me was an open mind. So I don't think I will ever regret him doing that for me. So, um, anyway, we are going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, Lee and I are going to have a Bible study. Get prepared, people. See you in a bit.
The world's largest radio station for the trans community. Trans Radio UK.
Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. As promised, we are now going to have a Bible study. Last week, we were having a conversation about how far back in history this particular challenge between the Israelis and everybody else in the region goes back. And I did make the point that it's biblical. So for me, I think this entire conflict entirely starts if we're going to have a Bible study. We're going to have a Bible study, and we're going to start with Joshua, the book of Joshua. So for context purposes, the book of Joshua starts with Moses, who went up a mountain and saw an apparition that came out of a burning bush. Between you and me, I think it was a particular kind of bush, and I think he had a particular kind of experience. Which was possibly hallucinogenic. However, Moses came down from the mount and obliterated, actually, we're going to talk a little bit later about Yahweh's body count, because he beats Rambo and everybody. Yahweh's body count is incredible. But anyway, Moses comes down, they do the trek through the wilderness, and we now come in at the book of Joshua. And the book of Joshua says, so God, Yahweh, says to Joshua, my servant Moses is dead. Get ready now, you and all the people of Israel, and cross the river Jordan into the land I'm giving them. As I told Moses, I have given you and all of my people the entire land that you'll be marching over. Your borders will reach from the desert in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, the great Euphrates River in the east, and through the Hittite country to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Joshua, No one will be able to defeat you. As long as you live, I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will always be with you. I will never abandon you. Be determined, be confident, for you will be the leader of the people as they occupy this land which I promised to their ancestors. There you go. Therein lies the entire historical background for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Joshua, the book of Joshua is, it's a story of conquest of Canaan with the aid of God. But I think if you look deeper into it, it's a story of how God, to whom the whole world belongs, at one stage in history, reconquered a portion of the earth, and claimed it for his people, defending their claims by force. And I think that's a very important part of where the story began. It was one point in history, and it was reconquering that portion of the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. It's kind of like, well, there's not really. It's not like they were holding title deeds.
No.
So that's kind of that kind of gets me a little bit. I have to be honest. And then they assemble on the banks of the River Jordan, which I've been to, and I think the thing which really makes me laugh about this passage is where, so apparently, according to the historical record, because the Bible is a historical, Joshua sends some spies into Jericho to find out, what's going on in Jericho. And I've actually been to Jericho. I have to say, it's there's something so powerful about being in what is contemporarily the oldest known city on earth. Anyway, so Joshua sends his spies into the land of Canaan, and they go to Jericho. And it says here, when they came to the city, they went to spend the night in the house in the house of a prostitute named Rahab. Okay. I mean, long story short, and spoiler warning, they destroy Jericho, and Rahab's house is restored because she helped these spies out. But apparently she was a prostitute? Oh my goodness, how can that be? Lee?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus was quite kind to prostitutes, wasn't he?
I'm guessing they have a thing for prostitutes.
Well, it is technically known to be like the oldest profession in the world, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah, I think that's why. Yeah. All right. So that was my opening salvo. Was the this particular moment in time? What did you got, Lee? Go for it.
Okay, so yeah, and I think Joshua recounted a story is a story about contradictions, because on the one hand, God gave the land that he had promised to the nation, and on the other hand, the people failed to possess the land completely, allowing some of the inhabitants to remain. God fulfilled his side of the bargain, but the Israelites did not finish the job. The Canaanite peoples then became a damaging influence as the years went by. So it was like God did his bit, but his people didn't do their bit. And I think that's the importance of the book of Joshua.
What was their bit?
Well, I think they had to trust and obey, and be of good people, and
Do
they
what God
didn't
told
do
them,
that.
right?
Yeah, do what God
Yeah.
told them, and they didn't really. They were mingling with prostitutes and the like.
Well, if you read the story, if it weren't for Rahab, the whole thing wouldn't have worked. So, yeah, a prostitute, let's be blunt about it. A prostitute was the cornerstone for the sacking of Jericho. So, score one for the prostitutes.
Yeah, it was
Absolutely.
disobedience.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's really fascinating. But I think for me, the thing which really strikes me about the book of Joshua, which is I think from that does connect to the oldest stories around the Arab Israeli conflict, is the book of Joshua. And it's where the that's what it all comes down to, is this, they the Jewish people believed, and I've been educated in the ways of the Jewish people and the Torah and all of those things, so I do speak from a place of knowledge because it was taught to me. And what was taught to me was that God gave us the divine right to take over this territory because it was always ours. And it goes back to Abraham, and apparently God had a pact with Abraham, which predates Abraham, is from Genesis. And God made a pact with Abraham because Abraham was prepared to sacrifice his oldest son to God. So God was like, okay, I will forever promise you these lands and they will always be yours. And that is the cornerstone. And it kind of goes back that this is the thing which, in a lot of ways, I really wanted to talk about today because it's Sunday and we're having a Bible study. So we're studying the Bible. Is that Jehovah, Yahweh, God, whatever you want to call him, made some sort of ancient pact with Abraham that said, this is always yours. And it just really, it's always bothered me from my earliest days in Sunday school. I was raised in a very complicated environment, both Christian and Jewish and agnostic. So I'm a very confused person. I will confess to that. But the thing for me which really strikes me is the extent to which we today are still 2, 3, 4,000 years later fighting a proxy war that started centuries, millennia ago. And it just seems to me to be completely redundant. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it was millennia ago that these historical events occurred, and we're still, arguing and fighting over this. And isn't it time now to sit down and have a dialogue like you are having with the RFU tomorrow? It all starts with sitting down and having a discussion. And I don't see that happening right now because it's it's just this ongoing battle, and nobody is prepared to sit down and properly talk about it. um and then you throw in the religious context, not just the historical context, but you've got Muslims who also they claim that they've got access to this land through history and all the rest of it, and the um Jerusalem being the city that is most disputed because of these three different religious sects coming together and having sort of like temples and places of worship and spiritually meaningful places. But all we're doing is just fighting and not talking.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? It's like, just for heaven's sake, just start talking to each other.
Mm.
It And we said this last week. It's like, my God is better than your God, but actually it's the same God. And when
Same
you
God.
actually go and you do a little bit of research, read your Old Testament, Arabs and Israelis are descended from Abraham, for goodness sake. You have the same patriarch. Get over yourselves. It's rubbish. It's complete rubbish. And I need to go to a break because I'm going to get politically incorrect. So we've got a quick break. We'll be back after this with a little bit more Bible study. See you in a bit.
The world's largest radio station for the trans community. Trans Radio UK.
Welcome back, beautiful, amazing human beings. I hope you are having an interesting time with Lee and I this afternoon. We're definitely going all out on all kinds of different things. So Lee, tell us about Jonah.
So I've always been fascinated by the story of Jonah and the big fish, and how he was out on the ocean, and there's this big storm, and Jonah's thrown overboard, and he's swallowed by a big fish. And after 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, Jonah prays for forgiveness, and the fish spews him out onto dry land, and Jonah is able to complete God's mission. And even as a child, it was like, that's impossible. How can he? And talking about like the Mandela effect, I always thought of it as the whale. He was swallowed by a whale, because I guess that's a big fish, But how could he be inside the belly of a big fish, a whale? That's impossible, And so that was one of the stories that I didn't quite believe, or I couldn't quite conceive how this could happen. So that was one of the Bible stories that stick out for me in my mind, Jonah and the big fish.
Yeah, that whole idea around, and there are stories in the Bible and in the ancient Sumerian texts about the peoples that came from the ocean.
Yes.
And we love to have a little dabble in things that are outside the ordinary. What do you think the connection is with potentially ancient aliens?
Well, I think that's exactly what it is. I think a lot of our history has been purposely hidden from us. So information like perhaps these ancient aliens that came, um, with their flying, burning chariots and things like that. Obviously, these people of that civilization didn't understand what it was, what and kind of like the descriptions of things like that, like maybe a flying saucer would be a flying chariot, and perhaps the big fish that swallowed Jonah was in fact one of these ancient alien civilizations that perhaps had a submarine. I mean, that to me makes more sense than being swallowed by a big fish.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's always interested me is that the Earth is predominantly water. So if we were to be colonized by some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence, given that the majority of the planet is water, they would be a water-borne. The water would be more interesting to them than the land. I mean, that makes sense to me. And even if you want to go Darwinian and you want to be like, what's the right word? Sort of conventional about it. If you want to go with Darwinian theory, we all came from the ocean, primordial swamp, and all the rest of it. That I don't think it's a huge stretch to imagine that there is an advanced civilization that has developed itself under the water, because most of our planet is water. So why do we assume we are at the pinnacle of achievement on this planet? Why do we believe we are the apex when most of our planet is under the ocean? That to me is. I was watching something today with Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Yeah.
and he was saying, like, all this talk about terraforming Mars when we don't even understand how our own planet works. Why is it beyond the realms of possibility that there is, we crawled, according to Darwin, we crawled out of the oceans and that's who we are. Awesome. But then what about those species that remained under the water? If we have advanced to the point where we can put a man on the moon, and the jury's still out on that one.
Yeah,
Um,
allegedly.
yeah. Why is it such a stretch that there would have been some great civilization that has developed under the oceans? Why do we assume we're like the top dog? That to me is
Arrogance.
just, yeah. And the idea that Jonah
Jonah.
was swallowed by a big fish. If this was 4,000 years ago and a submarine emerged to the surface and Jonah disappeared into a submarine, anyone who was there to tell the story would have thought he was eaten by a big fish.
By a big fish.
Yeah. So this is ancient aliens meet Old Testament Bible meet, I don't know, all kinds of things. It's wow. Yeah, I just think that is this idea that somehow as human beings we own this planet when most of the planet, we are land based, and we're fighting over what is it, 2/3? So 2/3 of the world is covered in oceans. What's the
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's a huge proportion. There's a tiny bit of land. The rest is water.
And here we are thinking we are the Ubermensch. We own this planet. Maybe we are just the also ran. Because it is quite interesting. I mean, when you think about the stuff that's come out around the UFOs and the UAPs, because now the military have got to say, okay, we're going to call them unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Phenomenons.
Yeah, because apparently that's not, because then it's different to unidentified flying object. It's different. It's not the same. It's the military have said this is what it is. So, yeah, so we're supposed to assume that we are the only ones on this planet. And for all that we think about alien life out in the universe, I don't think we've even begun to understand what exists on the planet. Your thoughts?
Exactly. Yeah. Um, and again, it kind of like links with other discussion points that we've had on this show. It's, don't just believe face value what you are told. Do your own research. Have an open mind, um, and don't be so blinkered because there's a certain narrative that has been told, and we are believing it as if that is the only possible outcome of it. But open your mind and do your own research. I mean, we live in this world now where we've got tiny little computers in our pockets on our phones. It's not like information is not out there. And yeah, I mean, just do your own research because there's a lot out there that has been hidden from us.
I think that's really important because it was only when I finally had a mobile phone that I could sit there. It was a BlackBerry, one of those old Blackberries. And I remember like keying in and saying, why is it that I think that I'm a girl?
Yeah.
And that was when I discovered transgender. So don't be afraid to do your own research. We've talked about this, haven't we?
Mm. Yeah,
You've got to.
exactly.
You've got to like get out there and yeah, a lot of it might be the biggest load of nonsense on the planet. Well, when I say on the planet, on the terrestrial planet, the bit that's below the waterline. Yeah, you've got to just discover. My personal life philosophy is centered on something that I read from Twain. What was Twain's first name?
Mark
Mark
Twain.
Twain. There we go, Mark Twain. And it goes, at the end of my days, I will be more disappointed by the things I didn't do than those which I did. So throw off the bowlines, sail from the safe harbor, explore, dream, discover. And that has to be at the cornerstone of what we do, because we are a curious species. And curiosity, I think the whole thing around curiosity killed the cat is an invention of the religious mind limiting paradigm that we live in, which is actually the greatest gift we have is our curiosity. And I hope we never ever lose our curiosity. And that's, we joke about it, this Bible study, but all Lee and I are doing is being curious. We're taking information that's been given to us and we're saying, okay, let's have a think about that. And we're going to have a think about it over the next commercial break, and we'll be back in a minute.
The world's largest radio station for the trans community. Trans Radio UK.
Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. I hope you are enjoying this conversation that we're having. Lee and I have actually concluded that we're going to actually need to do a series on this because there is so much to cover. And given the limitations of time that we are constrained by, we are going to have to do a little bit, and we'll do Bible study, I think, again next week. My favorite story, let me share with you my favorite Bible story. and this has always been like at the cornerstone. It's kind of it. I love it because it like blends the ancient aliens and some kind of superpower and all the rest of it. But it's a story around Sodom and Gomorrah. In conventional wisdom, sodomy apparently is the act of one man penetrating another man through the other end. There's no lesbian equivalent. I'm sorry, there's no lesbian equivalent. But let's be clear. Okay, so the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, I love it, but it's what happens at the end that's important. But let me talk you through it. So, Lot and his wife live in, I can't remember if it's Sodom or Gomorrah, but they're living in this town, and the angels come to Lot, and they say to Lot, "We're going to destroy your whole cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to obliterate them, and because they are wretched, awful people." So these angels come and tell Lot this thing, like, oh, this is going to happen. And Lot is like, okay, yeah, I'm a God-fearing man, and yeah, I'll sort you guys out. And then the angels go into Lot's house, and then the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, or is it Sodom and Gomorrah, or just Gomorrah? I don't know. And anyway, the people gather outside Lot's house, and they say to Lot, "Give us those people that you've got in your house, because we want to have our way with them." This is in the Bible, guys. It's in the Bible. So these people want to have their way with the angels. And Lot says, "Do you know what? Actually, I tell you what, like, leave these people alone, but I'll give you my daughters, because they're virgins. You can have your way with my daughters." Isn't that nice? It's like, no. Don't have your way with the angels. Go have your way with my daughters, rather. It's insane. Anyway, shuffle forward. God gets really upset about all of this and tells Lot, "You got to get the hell out of Dodge." So Lot and his wife and his daughters head off into the hills, and God rains hellfire, which sounds very almost like a nuclear attack. Anyway, God rains hellfire on Sodom and Gomorrah and tells Lot's wife, "Don't look back, don't look back." And Lot's wife looks back and gets turned into a pillar of salt, which is also quite ancient alien. Is it a nuclear attack? Anyway, Lot's wife gets killed off, and Lot and his daughters end up in a cave. And Lot's daughters decide that this is clearly the end of civilization as we know it. So there's just us two daughters and our dad. So what we're going to do, we're going to get Dad pissed, and both of us are going to be impregnated by our dad. Gotta love a bit of incest. What's your thoughts, Lee? By the way, guys, this is biblical. This is the Bible. We're doing a Bible study. This is a Bible study. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, so the story is in Genesis 19 verses 30 to 38. And yeah, if you have a look at it kind of like from through our eyes and linking it back to the show, I mean, it's quite incredible, this story, because when people recount the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot and his wife, they link it to, well, this is the Bible saying that homosexuality is bad because the it will lead to destruction. So it's often quoted as a Bible passage that says how wrong homosexuality is. The other thing that people remember is that Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. But not a lot of people actually remember the story about Lot and his two daughters living in the cave. And, one day the older daughter said to the younger one, "Our father is old and there is no man around here to give us children." I mean, this is absolutely what is quoted in Genesis 19. All the men had been annihilated in the fire and sulfur from the destruction. So yeah, they get him drunk, and they have their way with him. And I think it goes on that the older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab, and he is the father of the Moabites today. And the younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben Ami, and he is said to be the father of the Ammonites today.
Um, it's like, where do you even start with that story? I think the thing which is when we were putting this show together, I said to Lee, right, we're going to do Bible study, and we were like, okay, let's go find stuff that's like really weird and out there. And this to me has to be one of the cornerstones of an absolute ridiculous, crazy. Where on earth do you begin? Like, it's incest. Incest. They get him drunk and they get pregnant off. I'm just like, being trans, there was a time when I defined as male. And I have to be honest with you, if I've had too much of the grape, I'm not very performative in that function. I full credit to them for getting him drunk and still managing to actually copulate. What a wonderful story. I mean, blessings of God, surely, that he even could get it up enough that he actually made one pregnant on one night and then made the next one pregnant. I mean, how far disconnected do you have to be from reality to have sex with your own daughters? Seriously.
Well, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't know.
No, but I disagree. I have a problem with this because I was born male, and there is a thing that men have which is called brewer's droop, which is if you drink too much of the vine, be it wine or hops or whatever it is, it desensitizes you down there. And it's incredibly difficult to copulate when you're drunk. And I don't understand how they actually did that. I mean, he can't not have been enough there to know what he was doing. And anybody who's watching or listening to this story, this podcast, this radio show, anyone who was assigned male at birth has to acknowledge that there is a point beyond which you are compos mentis and able to understand what's going on. Equally, in the moment that that happens and you pass beyond that bridge, you can't have one and not the other. You can't be conscious enough to copulate, but unconscious enough to know what's going on. That to me is just doesn't make sense. It's not physiologically possible.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you could probably understand what the daughters were thinking, given that Sodom and Gomorrah were just, nuked by God. And they're probably thinking, oh my goodness, mom's dead. She's a pillar of stone, and all the Sodomites and the Gomorrites are dead, and we're the only 3 people left on the planet, and we're gonna have to get Dad drunk. I'm sure they must have wanted to get drunk themselves if they were going to sleep with their father. But you can understand in a way their way of thinking. We've got to, we're the last people left on Earth, and we've got to carry on, and Dad's the only man, so let's drink some wine or get merry and do our bit for civilization.
That's like that scene from Greece. Let's do it for our country, the red, white, and the blue. Yeah, I think you're being very generous, Lee. I think you're being very generous. I still just, it really bothers me that Yahweh decided to obliterate Sodom and Gomorrah because they were. What's interesting is it's never actually specifically stated that they were. So the modern definition of a sodomite is someone who has anal sex. It's a man having anal sex with another man. That's sodomy. That is the legal, technical definition of sodomy. So if they are saying that was terrible, it was so terrible that it was necessary to obliterate an entire society, and the end result of that is the incest between 2 daughters and their father, equitable. I don't know. I mean, the whole thing just seems to me to be entirely bizarre.
I think if we do, and I think we should, if we do some more kind of stories like this, it does make you question, doesn't it? How on the one hand you've got this, the whole sort of like homosexuality is so terrible that God had to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, but on the other side of the story, it's incest, and that is okay because they were the last people left on Earth, so they had no other choice. But how can incest be okay? But on the other hand, whatever was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah was not and had to be destroyed. And I think there's a lot of examples like this where there's this contraindication. And it's up to you to do your research, have an open mind, discover for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to have to be a series because I haven't even got into the stuff I want to talk about. So a lot of what we've talked about, and I mean, I get exactly what you're saying, Lee. I think the thing which really strikes me is a lot of people who would, under the current paradigm, would say, yeah, but everything you've been talking about is all Old Testament stuff, And yes, that was the Old Covenant, and then there was the New Testament, which is the New Covenant, and Jesus came, and there's a lovely quote I can't think exactly what it was from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but it's a quote which is, I come not to bring peace, but to bring the sword, to turn mother against daughter and father against son. So that's something Jesus said. So for all those people who will be thinking to themselves, yeah, but that's Old Testament, the New Testament, Jesus came, he made a new covenant with man and came up with a new way for man to engage with God. So 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 to 15. Let a woman learn quietly and with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became the transgressor. Yet she will be saved, though, through childbearing, if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. Oh, aren't we so lucky? Oh, we are forgiven.
The world's largest radio station for the trans community. Trans Radio UK.